I'm here with Paul. Hey, Paul, you recently got third place in the PPG's July 23rd online region. How many players were there?
There was over 1,000. I don't know the exact amount, but I think it was over 1,000 players. I went 9-1 on that. I had one loss, which I will talk about later on when going through the deck profile. And yeah,
this was your first online event, correct?
This was my first online.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
First online event, and you got third place. Major accomplishment right there off the bat.
My wife, she also plays here. She's a law player. She's been to other tournaments like Yu-Gi-Oh and stuff, but this is the first card game that I've been trying, I wanted to take seriously. And something about, I'm a One Piece fan. Zoro, just because he's a top deck, of course. He's my favorite character in the show, so.
And that's what you took for the event? You play Zoro?
I played Zoro, and I just really like how he was in the format. The two biggest challenges that I faced, one of them I didn't face luckily at all, was the Doflamingo. I really feel like OPO3 Zoro really struggles with Daffy, especially if they can get bored and they have 3,000 worlds to get rid of my 5-cost Marcos. Spoiler alert, he's in the deck profile and he's arguably one of the MVPs. And of course, Whitebeard. Whitebeard was everywhere, which there was some stuff in here that some Zoro players do run. I run it too, which we'll talk about as we go through the deck profile. But yeah, let's get started with the deck profile.
All right, let's get started.
Disclaimer, some of these cards, as most of you probably know, are limited now to one. So this is pre-ban list, some of these cards, i.e. the Blocker Marco, which we'll get to, and Radical Beam. And after the whole idea of this, I'll explain what you can do for other
for the next format, upcoming format.
Next format, but also post-ban to play Zoro, what cards you should substitute inside. Because one thing about this is, unlike Whitebeard and Ace, I don't think Zoro got hit that much at all. In fact, I think Zoro even will do better than he did pre-ban list, even though he lost a lot of defense. Personally, in my opinion. I could be wrong, which if that's wrong, hey, whatever. But I feel like Zoro's not only going to be the #1 in the meta, but he's going to be #1 in the meta by a landslide. So we'll get into that as well.
All right.
Let's just start with my deck profile. This is nothing new for a lot. Where you have 4 Ezo, he's your searcher.
Yeah.
I don't even need to go into this, but I will. You search the Whitebeard package. Excuse me. Super strong. The whole idea is, if you don't see a 5-cost Marco and you search with this, it's pretty much your #1 target in almost every single matchup you go to. The only one that you would be a little skeptical on getting is the Doflamingo matchup and blue in general, because they can 3,000 worlds it pretty much on curve. But you still even one as well. It can still be a counter in hand. For specifics, even late game, you still can use him. He's a 1-cost when you have a lot of Don to either search your Jozu, which is a 2K counter. You can even search a Whitebeard Pirate just to keep cycling through your deck over and over again. Really good card. Amazing as well with the ramp with Magra and Makino that you can get. Amazing card. Next one, some Zoro decks run it, others don't. I feel like every Zoro deck should run this. It's 4 buggy.
This is the one that can't be killed by a strike, right?
With Slash.
Slash.
In the mirror, it is a very good card, but the reason why this card is so good is it literally gives the Law matchup such freedom, where the Law has to play so much around it just to get rid of this card. Of course, there's another card on here which is the MVP for pretty much a lot of matches, but makes the Law matchup so dominating. But as well, the one thing I like about this card is it's a 1/3 with 1 Don on your leader, of course, 1 Don in here. You swing 5, super Don efficient. Excluding, of course, the Slash. That's just an amazing thing that it has with it. A lot of Zoros run the Sunny still, which Sunny's fantastic and all, but the fact that I run a little more events in this deck, which you'll see a little bit later, is this.
What's your event count?
The event count, I think, is 13 or 14. I have to count when we get there. But even if you whiff, even if I don't have events, I still would consider running him for the sheer amount of utility this provides. Where if you, depending on what's on board, even if it's just all Slash and there's 1 strike, you can theoretically defend this from that strike, and he is protected because the rest are all Slash. I've done that a lot, especially even in this regional, even against a Magellan, which I don't know if it was streamed or not. They had 2 slashers on the board, and I used a guard point when he swung 5 to block the Magellan, and he had 2 slashers for a buggy. which most people think that's stupid. Why would you waste your block on this? But it's because Magellan couldn't get rid of this guy except from the leader. So I blocked it, and because of that, he stayed, and I got to swing another 5k next turn for 1 Don. The third searcher that's a body that's on here is 3 Dadan. And of course, I'm sorry, 3 Dadan, 4 Dadan. And of course, you know, this is literally arguably the most important searcher in the deck. It searches
everything.
Other searchers,
yeah.
Searches the rest of the 1 cost in here. I think there's over 20 targets in here. This will never miss. And if it misses, well, it's because you sucked at shuffling. I don't know what else to tell you. This thing is so good, not just for that. It's a body. It's a dangerous body on Zoro because it's the same stat. Well, it's 2-3 instead of 1-3, but 1 Don on your leader, 1 Don on this, swing 5k. The best part about this is it is fuel for a card that will be said later on here, which a lot of you can probably guess, that really helps the Whitebeard matchup, and I'll get to that when I get to it. So it's an amazing card. This is, if you're running Zoro or pretty much Law or most Reds in this case, you cannot afford not to run Curly Dadan. It's such a good card. Going into the 1 drops that Dadan can search that's not a searcher itself, for Otama.
Best card.
This
Best
is
card. Emotional damage.
The best card ever. So
yeah.
it's like, you know, it has a lot of utility in Zoro. Of course, it's the best with Law, but with Zoro, you can combine it with anything just to get rid of a pesky attacker that's on board that you really need to get rid of, because it can be a problem. It can utilize in so many aspects. You can combine this with Marco to basically pop a 5 cost. And while that does cost 6 Don, if you go off on curve when you're going second, it is a great way to get momentum back and shift it into your favor. So, again, didn't really need to say much about that. Everyone knows how good Otama is. She is arguably the best card ever created. So, my personal favorite card, I think, is the Makino. So, Makino is a 2k counter, but as most of you know, you play her, you rest her, ramp 1 of your 1 cost, which is half the deck, and then this thing swings for 5 with a Don Zoro 6. And 6 is a really good number most of the time, because even though you're like, oh, with 7, they will pitch 2 cards. Sometimes I don't care about them pitching 2 cards. I may want them to pitch a 2K, because then I can keep that in my head for later, like, oh, well, they wasted a ton of 2Ks, and then it makes it easier for mid to late game to go for game. And with this, if you see 1 in your hand and you get a second one, it is pretty much guaranteed in certain matchups that you cannot lose, because you apply so much pressure, and then they always have to swing into this. If they leave this on board, they lose the game. They have to swing into this card, and if they don't, they sometimes will swing into a 1 cost that's on the board, sure, and that way this can't ramp, but if I play another 1 cost and I don't use it and you do not pop it, GG next turn. So, for Makino, amazing card. To complement the Makino, I run 2 Magra. I only run 2 because one of the things is that when ramping, I only ramp maybe 2 or 3 times a game. Very rarely do I ever ramp like 4 or 5 times, because if you have to ramp that much, you do lose a lot of card advantage. And if they can survive, especially Whitebeard can survive that, they can out-prioritize you, and then when you have no cards in hand, it feels bad, man. It's a very feels bad moment. But this is a good amount because I love Magra. Magra, the card is very good. It's the same ramp process as Makino, but instead of resting it, it can be a 1K for later use if needed. So that's why I have Magra at 2. Some people run it at 3 and even 4, but I feel like the Makino should be at 4 because of the utility it provides as a 2K counter as opposed to the 1K counter. Otherwise, it's an amazing card. You can search it through Dadan, and you can still use it as an attacker. This one, I decided, I used to run 3 Gordon. I'm running 1, and the problem is I want to run it at 2. I recommend for anyone to run it at 2. It's just that for me personally, and this is just a personal thing, I've had a recency where I would always get this off of life as the last life, and it's so annoying to have this off of life as a brick and not being able to counter out, because if it was just anything else, an event out of life or 1K, I could have had the game. So I moved it down to 1. I would still recommend it to 2. There were games that I still won, but it would have been more comfortable if I just had this in hand. So I would recommend running this at 2. It's still a great card.
Would you run this as 2 Post-banlist?
Post-banlist, post-ban, thank you for bringing this up, Austin. I would 100% run this at minimum 2. I would even actually recommend you run it at 3. Because post-banlist now, because of the Radical Beam being at 1 and Marco, this can not only be an offensive card, this is something that people don't realize. This is a defensive card if you think about it. Because you use 1 Don for a card that could be an attacker next turn that you can KO much easier. Which, if you think about that, that's a defensive play for next turn, because it's 1 less attacker you do not have to worry about. So if they swung for 9k with this attacker, and you had to waste resources to block, you just got rid of it previous turn for 1 Don and a swing. So you protected yourself from that. So in a sense, that's a defensive card in a nutshell.
Yeah. So
I would recommend for the post-ban list, this should be a 2 or 3 of in a Zoro deck. You can even run 4 of. I've seen a lot of people run it at 4 ofs. Especially with the Nami engine and the Dan, which we can talk about after this entire talk through with the cards. But yeah, Gordon's very good. I keep it at 1 specifically for this tournament. It was very helpful. I used it in a lot of games. I either had it in opening hand in life, or I searched it the 1 from the Dan. So, and 1 does work because you can again search from the Dan. So, next I would say is either the MVP or the second MVP of the deck. It is Marco, the 5-cost Marco. This card is absolutely nuts. Of course, Whitebeard, every red deck runs it, but I think in Zoro it is better than in any other red deck. The fact that you play this, if you have 1 Don or Zoro, it is now a 7k swing. Unbelievably nutty. Think of Kingdu, but just way better. And then people can say, well, Kingdu's 8k. In my opinion, 8k is not really that good of a number, except against Whitebeard, which that's why you run Kingdu. But even then, when you're swinging 7k, they still have to respect that and waste a 2k off of the Whitebeard's hand, which phenomenal, absolutely amazing. And of course, you know the KO of 3 costs or less is whatever. Vista can do the same thing. The main thing is the revival, and that's why I run a lot of events. This goes really good in tandem with Buggy. My goodness, the fact that Buggy can give you fuel to bring this guy back, and then if you have about 5 cards in hand, even if they know you have 1 event, they don't know if you have another event. And being able to get into the opponent's mindset of whether to attack into this or into leader is so crucial in certain matchups. And if you can correctly predict or bluff, even if you have no events, to make them not swing into this, wins you so many games. Absolutely. This is a must-have card, even post-ban list, even if you don't run the Ezo package, the Whitebeard package, you need to run 4 of in every single Zoro deck. If you don't run it in a Zoro deck, you're doing something wrong. My personal opinion. This one does have some controversial opinion. I run 4 Jozu. In a non-Whitebeard package, you're not going to run this card at all. This is essentially just a 2K.
Yeah.
Most people run it at 3, and for me, I don't know why. I feel like you need a lot of 2Ks, especially ones that you can search. I feel like that's why some people run it at 3, because, oh, I can search it. But being able to have 4 gives it the consistency needed to have it to your hand. And having some 2Ks with Zoro, of course, is very nice. Obviously, if they swing for 7K, it's a problem, but if you have 1 down open, they swing for 7K, that's what guard point is for. Spoilers, that's going to be probably a little later in the deck profile. So, obviously a 2K if you're running the Ezo package. I put it at 4 of. You can obviously get away with it with 3, but for me, I just like the consistency of having 4 2Ks. That's my take on Jozu. Here we go on the first ban of the limit is 4 blocker Marco. This card is, I'm so glad it got hit. This is probably the second best card in the Zoro deck behind Radical Beam for obvious reasons. It is the best blocker in the game, bar the Borsellino and Fukuru, because even though it can be KO'd, you can just get revived very simply. Unless you are running the Ezo, the Whitebeard package post restriction list, you don't run this at 1 at all. But if you do run the Ezo package that can search Whitebeard pirates, you will always run this at 1. There's no reason not to. Even though it's a 1 of, it's still searchable by the Whitebeard pirates and by Ezo. So it still gives you 8 chances to get this. So even though you're only at 1, Zoro most of the time only needs 1. Whitebeard's the one that needed 2. Zoro, if you have 1, it's pretty much happiness, because at that point, if you can survive that 1 turn, Zoro will most likely go for game with this next turn. So having it at 1 is the perfect sweet spot for Zoro, which is why I was saying earlier that Zoro, out of all the red decks, got hit the least, even though it looked like he got hit just as hard as the others. Zoro didn't get hurt that much with this, in my opinion. So that's the Marco. This is, again, pre-limitations. So this is the card that is the Whitebeard Killer, I like to call it. It's the Teach card. In Whitebeard, if I see this in hand and I see no searchers and I'm against Whitebeard, I will 100% keep this hand. This card literally flips the matchup on Whitebeard to make it even. I cannot express how good this card is. It makes me want to run 2, but in every other matchup, it's just a dead card. The only time it's not is if I have Block or Marco that I can pitch to revive it. Otherwise, this card is, in the Whitebeard matchup, the MVP. Luckily, very lucky, I guess you could say, I only fought 2 Whitebeards, and in both Whitebeards, when I fought, I happened to get this card, one from a search and one from my starting hand, and it just applied so much pressure. They had to waste, one of them had to waste their 9-Don turn instead of summoning Whitebeard to summon Ace just to get rid of this guy, and then after that, it was GG. I won the game. Absolutely nutty card. For if you're running the Whitebeard package, this will be moved up to 2. I do not think you ever, in any scenario, run this more than 2, because this is a brick in hand. You can't pitch it easily now because the blocker Marco is not in the format as much, and even then, it's very hard to do that for Zoro, who's going to be a little more aggro. This is good against decks that were a little more defensive. This is why it was so good against Whitebeard, because that 4-Don turn when playing him wasn't such a waste. So I still think if you're running the Whitebeard pack, you will take this, because it's in case there are more Whitebeards, because Whitebeard's still not going to leave, of course. He's just not going to be top of the meta anymore. It's still very good to make the matchup safe. And in other matchups, like against Yellow, this can provide a lot of utility, and it could be a target for Katakuri, because they might think, oh, it's a brick, I need to waste it on that instead of like a potential Shirahoshi, which Katakuri should do that anyway. But very good card, very good card. Helped me win my 2 Whitebeard matchups. Next is 3 Zoro. I had it at 4 before this, literally the day before the tournament, but then I realized, I was like, you know what? The whole idea of Zoro is...
What you replaced the 4th Zoro? Was it the Teach or...?
The 4th Zoro I replaced was not the Teach. It was... Let me look actually for this. I forgot exactly which it was. I think it was the extra Magra, because I was running 1 Magra. So I replaced it with the 1 Magra, because I felt like my early game is the whole point of Zoro. Your early game needs to be as dominant as possible.
Right.
For this specifically, even though I cannot search Zoro...
Yeah.
The idea is, all I want is to see 1, and even some matchups, I don't even want to see it. So against the Mirror, I want to see it. Against Whitebeard, I want to see it. But against like Yellow, even though it's Rush, I don't care for it to see it in Yellow. In Yellow, it will still help. It helps in almost every matchup, but certain matchups, it's something you want to see. And 1 is pretty much all you'll need, which in this, from life, hand, and the amount of draws from search, you might hit this at least once. I will say the 1 loss I took was completely my fault. Well played by my opponent. It was an ace player, and I played this too early. I should have waited, and because I played it too early and I was going for board, he got to play 3 Whitebeards in a row. At that point, I couldn't do anything. So that's the biggest weakness to this deck, is that if they play 3 Whitebeards in a row, which, case in point, that's why I think Zoro is now top of the meta, because Red cannot do 3 Whitebeards in a row. So, yeah, Rush Zoro, very good card. One last thing I will say before I move on. In the Straw Hat package, this will be an absolute 4 of. It is just too good in the Straw Hat package, which will be a very aggro-like deck. And because Nami can search it, it is just too much value not to have. And yeah, so very good card. Now we're going to move on to our events. Some decks run 4 of the Whitebeard Pirate searches. I only run 2. The main reason for this is if I get no other searcher and it's this will be a searcher, but this main thing is for fuel for the 5-cost Marco, 4-cost Marco, or another card, which you probably can guess, but I want to save the surprise for last because it's one of my favorite cards. But yeah, this is mainly a fuel card. That's all it is for, and as a last resort is a search. And it will try to search an EZO, so I can put that on the board as well. So 2 Whitebeard Pirates. I can see people go for 3. especially
Did
if
you go
you're
for 3 post-banlist?
yes. So post-banlist, if you're running the EZO package, I would actually recommend you run this to 4.
Just to see the Marco or
Yep,
just...
yep. 3 also works, but I would see 4 because this gives you a higher chance of having off trigger, which gives it a utility point when you get hit for life, and it gives it for your 5-cost Marcos to have a lot more flexibility and that 1 blocker Marco to revive it if you need to. But as the post-banlist is happening, the Whitebeard Pirates is going to not be as effective. It's still going to be nice, but not as effective. 3 guard point. After this post-ban list or restriction, whatever you want to call it, this will be 100% 4 of in all Zoro decks, except the aggro deck, which I'm not really the biggest fan of, but I feel like this will be the new Radical Beam. It's still a very good card. For 1 Don is 3k, like that's still amazing. Like the only other one I can think of that has it as the structure deck yellow in OPO3, the Yamato one that's coming out soon. And it does offer a little bit more, but it's still very nice for 1 Don, 3k, very nice. I will recommend for almost any other Zoro deck you should run 4. Then arguably the biggest hit was the Radical Beam, of course. I don't need to explain how good this card is. This is the nuttiest card ever to exist in this game. This needed to be hit, and this is the biggest hit to Zoro in my opinion. Not the Marco, not the Whitebeard. This. This was what made Zoro be a very good defensive deck for how much cost it needed. But again, everyone knows this at this point. I don't need to go in how much it was. In a Straw Hat deck, you will always run 1. There's no reason not to run 1 of this card. It's just like stupid. You can search it. Oh, I only get 1. Okay, it's 1 for 4,000 power. It's like, there's no reason you would never run this card. So yeah, a very good card. This literally saved me in like 4 games in this tournament. And if I didn't have this, yeah, I probably would have lost those because, but hey, this was why it's pre-banlist, so. And then, in my opinion, my favorite card of the whole deck is the Fire Fist. So, this card,
Art Fire Fist over there?
This is my Alt Art Fire Fist. I used to run 3. I ran 2 because you can get this relatively easy. Keep in mind, this card cannot be searched by the Whitebeard Pirates event because the event specifically says character card. This can be found by EZO though, and by Buggy. This is why Buggy is so key. I still have 8 searches to get this, so this is basically having 10 of these in my deck.
Right.
And this card literally clinched me definitely about 3 or 4 games. There was a Nami that would have beaten me, and I top decked this card, call it the Heart of Cards or whatever, and it literally completely made me win the whole game with this 1 card. Most people will ask me, why don't you run Jet Pistol, even though it's 1, it's for 6,000. And the reason I say that is because you have Otama and Gordon. Even though if you play Otama, you're wasting a potential 2k, the amount of utility that this can provide by getting rid of 2 bodies on board overvalues the 2k that could be used for a defensive turn. Because as I said earlier with the Gordon, if I take 2 potential attackers away from off of your board, that's essentially being a defensive play. And that is so powerful that even though the cost for this requires you to pitch another event, and if you play Otama, that's 3 cards, but that's all you need. If they have 2 monsters on board and you can get rid of it with essentially 3 cards, and then you have like a whole board, if they cannot defend that turn, you can just super aggro them, and the game could be over before they even reach 8 Dawn. I had that in 1 match where I did this very early against a Law. I fought 3 Laws. The Law I fought, he didn't even reach his 8 Dawn turn, and I won the game.
Oh.
And yeah, because he started his board. He had a Nico Robin he played because he was going to use it, and he had another Nami. I just Fire Fisted immediately because Nico Robin's such a pain in the ass. And then after that, I swung because I had 3 weenies and Zoro, and I just swung. He only had like 3k power in hand. He had to take all his life, and then on his 6 Dawn turn, he couldn't fill up his board again for 5 and shambles. And then next turn afterwards, he only had 1 blocker, and I just swung.
Yeah, you just had a bunch of attackers.
And it's just like, of course, that's a unique scenario, but that can happen with this card.
Yeah, it just gets rid of your opponent's problem monsters.
Amazing card. Amazing card. Would you run this at 3 of? If you're running the Whitebeard package, absolutely, I would run this at 3 of. Yes.
Would post-ban, would you build this deck more to more Whitebeard cards then?
So that's the thing. I haven't tested a lot, but my eye is there's right now 3 decks that Zoro will be running. a lot of people are going to be gravitating towards aggro, which will pretty much only run one Radical Beam as a defense. They'll opt out of Buggy. They'll basically make it a whole Straw Hat Dadan engine, and it's just going to be aggro as ever. And while that works for some people, personally for me, I think that's too much. I've had numerous times where like you will have a bricky hand, and what I mean by that is like 2 Rush Zoro, a Rush Luffy, and maybe 1 Searcher Nami. That's a horrible hand. That is terrible to have in your hand. That means you're going to have to play all of them, and then, yeah, they have Rush, but by swinging, that gives them a target, and because you don't have any counters in hand, you can't protect that board. And most people will be, for Zoro, this is how a lot of like Daffy players, which is why I think Daffy beats them, they will always go for your board first.
Right.
Which is why having weenies is very good early game, because if Daffy tries going for the weenies on board, sure, they'll get them, but that protects your life, and you can easily replace the weenies if you have enough searchers. But with the Zoro, and Rush Luffy, it's so much mana intensive that you can't really fill that board, even though they get initial Rush, which is phenomenal. And Rush Luffy, please don't say this, it's an amazing card, but it takes a lot of investment to put on when I can put 5 weenies on for the exact same amount and just wait next turn. And then that also works too. I think the 2 best formats for Zoro is going to also be the Whitebeard package. A lot of people don't think this, but for Zoro, being able to be a little more defensive by running only 1 Whitebeard, running the Izo with the Buggy combo. I think the Izo Buggy is just so powerful in this current meta, with the Dan as well. And then the things you add, you keep the Marco, you keep the Jozu. It'll just be 1 Marco.
Keep the 1 Marco.
We don't need the Radical Beams anymore. And then the thing you add is another Whitebeard Pirates. You add 1 9-cost Whitebeard, and you add another Fire Fist. And the whole idea of this is that with the Whitebeard, depending on your matchup, this deck, by the way, the reason why I was so scared of fighting Doflamingo is this deck hard loses to Doflamingo. You could still win, but because your highest boss monster is this 5 cost, they're gonna have a field day with you. By playing this, they're just like, huh, you just activated my trap card, and they play 3,000 Worlds. And it's like, oh, what if they don't have 3,000 Worlds? Well, they can either Daffy me, they have so many other plays.
They have sort of removal.
So that's why the 9-cost Whitebeard was so good. When Zoro had the Whitebeard 9-cost, he had a very good chance, better chance against the Doflamingo. And now, since it's limited to 1, even though it's only 1, that's all you're going to need most of the time. So having it in here is really good, because in the sense of, oh, I don't want to run the 9-cost Whitebeard in this scenario. Well, at that point, you have a blocker Marco that you can pitch it for to revive it. There you go. It's out of your hand, whatever. But the whole idea is now you still might want to use it. Personally, the reason why I didn't have Whitebeard here is I didn't like, I can't believe I'm even saying this, how slow it was. I'm very aggro, and being able to wasting my whole 9 Don turn on Whitebeard, don't get me wrong, gives me the 2k power, which is awesome, and it gives me the defense. But my goal is, if I just killed them first, why would I even want to use that? And having 9 Don to work with 4 weenies can do surprisingly a lot, even against Whitebeard. And then the other deck, which I think will probably be the best deck, is the Straw Hat package with defense. So the Straw Hat package using this 4 guard points, Sunny and Buggy. So instead of having Izo, it would be with Buggy and Sunny-kun. And then with the Dan and Nami, you would take out all the Whitebeard package except the 5-cost Marco, as I said earlier.
This card's just
good of a card. You just replace the Jozu with the Brooks. You place the Whitebeard Pirates with the Namis. And then you'd add a Rush Luffy, which in my opinion, I would not put more than 2. I feel like that card is an amazing card to have, but it can be very bricky a lot of times. With the Rush Zoro, you can say, oh, well, why is that at 4? It's 2 mana less. When you're 10 Don, you can literally put a Don on a Zoro and play 3 from hand for 6k swings each turn. You can't do that with the Rush Luffy. So, other than that, yeah, that's really it for the deck profile. I was very happy with my placement 3rd.
Do you remember all of your matchups were?
Yeah. So I distinctly remember the first match I had was against Whitebeard. I remember this match vividly because I won with 4 life. And this is not just me bragging. I'm just saying, because I got the Blackbeard, the teach, it completely
it changed the game. It favored to your
very bad hand, of course. What I will recommend, whenever you play Zoro against Whitebeard, people will always try going second. You should never go second against Whitebeard. Zoro should always go first. And the reason I say that is because it delays the Whitebeard one extra turn. And that is crucial with Zoro, because once he plays Whitebeard, if you cannot kill him that turn before he plays the second Whitebeard, it's over. You will 100% lose the game. There's no coming back. You cannot win the game. If he plays 2 Whitebeards and you have not won, even if he has 4 cards in hand and you have like 2 bodies, GG, it's over. You cannot win.
Good. Well, good thing you don't have to worry about 2 Whitebeards now.
I know, right? After Again, that's why I think Zoro is so good, because Whitebeard I still think will be a good deck still. Being able to have 6k power and all that life to give to your hand.
All those hand advantage.
But I feel like now Zoro fares much better against it.
All right, so that was your round 1. What about your round 2 and beyond?
The round 2 was against Law. I had Fire Fist and I had Buggy.
Was that the one where you got killed before you got to
that was the first one where before he got to his 8 Dawn turn. He got to his 8 Dawn turn, but he had to use all his resources to defend, because I had 4 bodies on board and he only had his Law, and 2 of those bodies were Buggy. And he had no Vista, so he literally could not kill the Buggy. So he had to kill, I think I had to Dan or something. And then he tried to fill his board, which he couldn't have. He had to get Rush Luffy to kill one of the Buggies. And after that, I'm just like, well, it's over.
You just have to attack.
3rd and 4 were Zoro mirror matches.
Oh, okay.
I was very careless. I did a mistake. I think it was even on stream, if I remember correctly. I did a very big mistake. Luckily, I etched it out. There was a play where I Marcoed the Vista, because he was running Vista instead of the Izo. And because of that, he got to use Makino twice on that Izo next turn. Luckily, I had just enough counter power to block it. This would have been much easier if I had just Vista'd the Izo and he couldn't have Makino'd. But luckily, I had just enough counter power, but that was a huge misplay on my part. And luckily, I went through on that. The 5th match was against Ace. This was my only loss. And he played phenomenal, but I feel like I was the idiot that didn't play it correctly. For some reason, when I fought him, I was like, oh, it's not Whitebeard, so I can go for his board. When this is Ace, and he's red. He triple Whitebearded me when he had 3 life, and I was like, well, I have no chance at this, because I should have immediately gone for face against it, because if I had gone for face, it would have made him maybe not want to play the Whitebeard. And he had 3 in hand. So that was a huge misplay on my part. But, you know, that's just how it was. He had 3 Whitebeards. He kept it. He didn't have to search any of it. So GG's to him for making, this is going to be my play. Then after that, round 6 was another Zoro. I did very good. I got curve. I went first.
How do you feel about in the mirror match?
In the mirror, you want to always go first. Yeah. Always.
But how do you feel about your skill in the mirror match?
It's hard to say, but for me, I feel very comfortable. Comfortable enough that I even made a mistake by popping the Vista instead of the 1 cost. For me, I feel very comfortable because I feel like most Zoros will try to go for board. And for me, I go straight for face, because unless they, especially pre-banlist, if they have no Dawn, remember, if this is going to be similar to my build, they're going to have a couple of events in hand. That's my thought process. Are they always going to? No. But if they have this, they will, and they have a Marco, they will almost always have an event in their hand. So I will never go after the Marco. My goal is just to swing into your life, always. And then at that point, if I go first and I get first turn to swing, they're going to probably realize, oh, he's probably going to do the same thing as me, and they'll go for my face. But since I went first and I did this, I'm going to always win this out, unless they can do max damage before my next turn. And if they can't beat me on that turn, well, I win, because at that point they tried to go for game for lethal, and then I'm going for lethal this turn because they didn't go after my board. But if I go second, the main thing is I try to play this card for in the mirror. And worst cases, I didn't see it even then. For the mirror, the most important card I would say is Blocker Marco and Buggy, of course. Buggy is obviously the most important card because The Dan can't hit it. They'd have to waste the Marco pop on the buggy, which it's not a waste because buggy's a threat. But if I have to go off curve, my goal is to always use the leader ability. When you go on first on curve, most of the time, because you're trying to build up your board and establish, you won't be able to use leader ability. When you go second, it gives it a little more freedom in order for you to use leader ability, which you should. That's my only thought process. But again, if you have the choice in the mirror, always go first. There should never be a reason you should go second. If you have to go second, you have to find some key cards. If you're playing this build, which you're not going to play anymore, you want to find Teach. If you go second and you have the Straw Hat package, go for the Rush Luffy. It gives Rush Luffy that 7k swing on Rush, so that's good. And yeah, that's my thoughts.
Then your your 8th and 9th.
Yeah, no, my 7th was against a Magellan. He was the eventual champion Whitebeard, and I fought him, and I felt really bad for him because he did really good, like amazingly good. But I feel like Zoro against Purple is just too dominant. Like there's I did probably so many misplays. I played very little Magellan, but like and he was doing amazing plays too. Stuff I've never seen. He played the stage. That's how confident he was with his Magellan.
The Impel downstage?
Yep, which for those of you who don't know, it's one Don to play.
Yeah, you rest it, you trash a card.
You trash a card, you look up 3, you get
add an Impel down, any Impel down.
It's a cycle in a sense. And I never thought about that, but the craziest thing he did was he used Domino, the blocker, the Impel down, as an attacker against my weenies. He never defended with it because I never swung into it. So I'm like, that's just a blocker, who cares? Yeah, very good player. It just, after going 8 searches, it's like 8 cards that replace themselves. It's kind of hard to get.
Yeah, you just had so much advantage by that point.
It's like, and props to him. And then the last 2 matches were against another Whitebeard and another Law, and the Law player was really close, but I ended up getting Fire Fist again, a nutty card in Law, and Whitebeard was also really close, but the best thing about it, which I can't brag about this anymore, on the turn that he was going to go for lethal, he had 2 Whitebeards, 5-cost Marco, and a blocker Marco, and himself. And in my hand was a Rush Zoro and 5 events, 4 Rad Beams. Yeah. So I was just, screw it. I had 4, I left 5 Don open. He was thinking it's probably a bluff. So he swung 10k. I took the first hit from life. It was a 2k counter. Second, Rad Beam, 2k. Blocked the 2 Whitebeards because he's trying to be Don efficient. Then he tried to be Don efficient. Rad Beam, Rad Beam, Rad Beam. Broken. Absolutely nutty. He was upset too, and I don't blame him because he was like, who the hell has all that Rad Beam? And because he didn't establish any board and he swung with his blocker Marco, GG.
Yeah, he just left himself wide open.
So and then the Law was what made me go 9-1, and ironically I got 3rd place, so I was very happy with my place.
Yeah, no, it's amazing job of what you did with your, and just like I said, this is your first online event. Yep. First major. Pretty much like your first major tour you ever participated.
I was so nervous. I was so nervous. I had a bottle of Hugs. That was my drink of choice. Like, man, yeah. But it was a fun experience. It was a very fun experience. The ban is, in my opinion, I think hurt Zoro the least. I still think it hurt him because, as I was just saying earlier, I can't just radical beam 3 times in a row.
Yeah.
I'm gonna miss that, but it feels bad for red players. But I mean, that's good for the meta, right? So. Yep. The only final thoughts I guess I will say is that Katakuri players are going to rise because Whitebeard's going to drop down, but aggro Zoro, most Zoro beats Katakuri. Most players sometimes will ask, well, Katakuri gets the triggers, so what if they get triggers? Like, the whole idea is you build a wide board and you swing with little numbers. If you can delay them to 10 drop Big Mom, you have no issue. You should not be scared at all. If you are really worried about the triggers, just don't even play the 5-cost Marco. He can just be used as a counter. Your whole goal is just to fill up your board and then just swing every time. And then they have to address your board at some point. And then if they waste their turn doing that when you have a lot of life, there you go. If they play 10-drop Big Mom, okay, trash the life. If they play the 7-drop Big Mom, that's even better. Trash your own life. The whole idea is you want to make sure you build a wide enough board, and then by turn 6, you swing and make them waste as much cards. Even if they get triggers off life, you should be in a very dominant position. So The only one that you should be worried about, ironically, is blue, especially Daffy, because they run the event Jinbei. And even though it's a lot of money, there's a reason why it's a lot of money. Event Jinbei literally makes this deck so hard to work, because the idea is you want to swing into that Jinbei to get rid of it, but if you swing into it, it gets rid of one of your weenies for free because it can bottom deck it, and that's one of the scariest feelings ever. So you might want to leave it on the board, but then they could just swing 5k every turn, and that's a feels bad moment. So I would say in this one, Daffy is going to also rise, because now that Whitebeard is not here, Daffy's worst matchup is Katakuri, which Katakuri is going to lose a lot of, especially aggro Zoro. It does really bad against aggro decks like Law and Zoro, and that's why Daffy's there. So I feel like this is going to be an Ouroboros chain, in my opinion, of the top meta is going to be shared by Zoro, Law, Katakuri, and Daffy. And that's my final thoughts.
Right. Any final shout outs or anything you want to give out to?
Thanks to you, Austin, for putting me on here, letting me talk my voice out. I love to talk, and I love to speak about One Piece. Surprisingly, I don't have social media. I'm not really a social media type of person, but I have a YouTube channel that Austin can even link to. That
I'll post it.
Sometimes I just hang around, post stuff on YouTube. I have a Twitter account that I just basically I never tweet, but I just go there looking at stuff. Yeah, that's it for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll lead to inactive. Hold on.
You're gonna do inactive tweeting. That's what you're gonna do.
Hold on. Not tweets. They're Zeeks now. Is that what they're called? There's an X now. Yeah.
See, that's exactly why I'm off social media. It's all that crap. Yeah.
It's X now.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it's just X. Hey, yeah. Hey, look, you'll post your videos on there, your X videos. Yeah, right, for people to watch and learn your insight. You'll post your combos there as well.
Yeah.
All right.
The fam's got to eat, right? Yeah.
All right, well, thanks for everything, Paul. Thanks for your insight and everything. Like I said, once again, congratulations on the 3rd place.
Thank you.
Amazing accomplishment and everything. All right, that was the video. Thanks for watching. Kate, thanks. Bye.